Sarah Thompson lived a life many would envy. Nestled in the heart of a quiet lakeside community, her home was surrounded by lush greenery and the soothing sounds of nature. Every morning, she woke up to the gentle chirping of birds and the faint rustle of leaves dancing in the breeze. Her backyard opened up to a breathtaking view of the lake, its waters shimmering under the golden sunlight. It wasn't just a house, it was her sanctuary. What made Sarah's property unique was the private gate at the edge of her land. This gate led directly to the lake, cutting through thick woods and bypassing the winding public road that other residents had to use. For years, this shortcut had been a cherished feature of her home, offering convenience and privacy. She loved taking evening strolls along the path behind her gate, listening to the soft crunch of gravel beneath her feet as she approached the water's edge. The neighborhood itself was picturesque, with rows of well-maintained homes and neatly trimmed lawns. Everyone seemed friendly enough, exchanging pleasantries during chance encounters or waving hello from across the street. At the center of it all was the Homeowners Association, HOA, an organization tasked with maintaining order and ensuring harmony within the community. Most people found the HOA reasonable, even helpful. They organized annual barbecues, holiday decorations contests, and occasional cleanup drives around the lake. But Sarah had always kept her distance from the HOA. Not because she disliked them, far from it, but because she valued her independence. She liked doing things her way, whether it was painting her front door a bold shade of blue or planting wildflowers instead of manicured hedges. While some neighbors adhered strictly to the HOA's guidelines, Sarah preferred to march to the beat of her own drum. Her motto? Live and let live. Her relationship with the HOA had never been strained, until now. Over time, subtle changes began creeping into the once peaceful atmosphere of the neighborhood. New members joined the board, bringing with them stricter rules and higher expectations. Fences needed repainting every 2 years. Mailboxes had to match a specific design. Even the color of curtains visible from outside windows came under scrutiny. Some residents grumbled quietly about these demands, but most complied without complaint. Sarah noticed the shift but chose to ignore it. After all, none of the new regulations affected her directly, or so she thought. Her secluded corner of the neighborhood felt worlds apart from the growing tension elsewhere. Life continued much as it always had for her. She spent weekends gardening, reading novels on her porch, or kayaking on the lake. Her days were filled with simple joys, far removed from the drama unfolding elsewhere. Little did she know, however, that trouble was brewing just beyond her tree-lined boundary. Unbeknownst to Sarah, certain members of the HOA had taken notice of her private gate. To them, it represented something more than just a personal convenience. It symbolized exclusivity, a privilege not shared by others. And soon they would come knocking, demanding access to what they believed should belong to everyone. For now, though, Sarah remained blissfully unaware of the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the lake, she sat on her porch sipping tea. The world seemed perfect, untouched by conflict or chaos. But perfection, as Sarah would soon learn, can be fleeting, and sometimes the calm before the storm is the most deceptive part of all. One sunny afternoon, while tending to her flower beds, Sarah heard the familiar ping of an incoming email on her phone. Wiping dirt from her hands, she picked it up, expecting nothing more than a spam message or perhaps a newsletter update. Instead, she froze when she saw the subject line, "Request for access to private gate, urgent." Curious, she opened the email. It was from the HOA board, signed by none other than Richard Langley, the newly elected president known for his no-nonsense attitude. The tone was formal yet pushy, leaving little room for negotiation. "Dear Ms. Thompson," it began, "we are writing to formally request access to your private gate for quicker access to the lake during community events. This will greatly benefit all residents and ensure smoother operations moving forward. We trust you understand the importance of cooperation in maintaining our community's standards. Please respond by Friday with your consent and arrange to provide us with keys to the gate." Sarah blinked, rereading the words several times to make sure she hadn't misunderstood. Access to her gate for community events, the very idea baffled her. Why would anyone need her private gate when there was already a perfectly functional public entrance? More importantly, why did they assume she'd simply hand over the keys without question? Her initial reaction was disbelief. Surely this was some kind of joke or misunderstanding. But as the reality sank in, disbelief gave way to irritation. Who did they think they were, demanding control over her property? The gate wasn't just a random feature. It was an integral part of her home's security system. Without it, anyone could wander onto her land anytime they pleased. Determined not to let this slide, Sarah drafted a polite but firm reply. She explained that her gate served a practical purpose, providing both safety and seclusion. She emphasized that she had no intention of granting access, regardless of the HOA's reasoning. Before hitting send, she added a final line. I hope we can resolve this matter amicably, but I must prioritize the integrity of my property. The response came faster than expected. Another email landed in her inbox late that evening, this one noticeably shorter and colder in tone. Ms. Thompson, your refusal to cooperate is disappointing. We urge you to reconsider your stance as failure to comply may result in further action. Your understanding is appreciated. Further action? What exactly did that mean? Sarah stared at the screen, her frustration mounting. She couldn't believe how quickly things had escalated. One moment she was living peacefully. The next, she was being threatened by her own neighbors. Over the following days, whispers began spreading throughout the neighborhood. Flyers appeared on mailboxes, subtly criticizing Sarah for being uncooperative and selfish. Some residents avoided eye contact when passing her driveway, clearly swayed by the HOA's narrative. Others openly questioned her motives, wondering aloud why she wouldn't share such a small convenience. Despite the growing pressure, Sarah refused to budge. She knew deep down that giving in would set a dangerous precedent. If she allowed the HOA to cross this line, where would it end? Would they demand changes to her landscaping next, or insist she repaint her beloved blue door to match their approved palette? As tension simmered, Sarah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder. Late-night noises outside her window made her uneasy. Shadows darting near her gate left her wondering if someone was testing its strength. Each day brought new anxieties, chipping away at the peace she once cherished. Still, Sarah held firm. She reminded herself that her home was her castle, and no amount of intimidation would force her to surrender her rights. But even as she stood her ground, she couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was only beginning, and that the HOA had no intention of backing down anytime soon. As days turned into weeks, the HOA's campaign against Sarah grew more aggressive. What started as polite emails and veiled threats had morphed into a full-blown effort to paint her as the villain of the neighborhood. Flyers appeared on every doorstep, detailing exaggerated claims about how Sarah's refusal to share her gate was causing inconvenience for the entire community. The flyers even included a map highlighting the supposed inefficiency of the public route. Compared to her private path, Sarah felt like she was living in a nightmare. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now avoided her altogether. Some crossed the street when they saw her coming, while others muttered under their breath whenever she passed by. Even the local grocery store cashier seemed colder, refusing to make eye contact as she rang up Sarah's purchases. It was as though an invisible wall had been erected around her, isolating her from the very people she'd called neighbors for years. But the HOA didn't stop at spreading rumors. Anonymous complaints began flooding in, some claiming Sarah's property was a hazard, others alleging noise disturbances late at night. One particularly absurd complaint accused her of playing loud music at 7 a.m., despite the fact that Sarah rarely listened to anything louder than the morning news. Each accusation was baseless, yet each one added another layer of stress to her already strained life. One evening, as Sarah returned home after running errands, she noticed something odd near her gate. Fresh tire tracks marred the dirt path leading up to it. Her heart sank as she stepped closer, inspecting the scene. The lock on her gate looked slightly scratched, and faint scuff marks suggested someone had tried, and failed, to force it open. A chill ran down her spine. Who would do this? And why? That night, sleep eluded her. Every creak of the house made her jump. Shadows outside her window seemed darker, more menacing. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Determined to protect her property, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. The next morning, she visited a local electronics store and purchased surveillance cameras. After installing them discreetly along the perimeter of her land, she connected them to a live feed on her phone. Now, no matter where she was, she could monitor activity near her gate. It gave her a small sense of control in an otherwise chaotic situation, but it also meant she'd see things she might not want to. Sure enough, just 2 nights later, her phone buzzed with an alert. Checking the app, she watched in disbelief as 2 figures approached her gate under the cover of darkness. They carried tools, a crowbar and what looked like bolt cutters, and moved with purpose. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. Was this really happening? Were these strangers, or worse, people she knew, trying to break into her property? Her mind raced. Should she call the police immediately? Or wait to see if they succeeded in breaching the gate before involving authorities? Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Quietly, she dialed 911, explaining the situation as clearly as she could without sounding hysterical. The dispatcher assured her officers were on their way. In the meantime, Sarah kept her eyes glued to the screen. The intruders worked quickly, their movements illuminated by the dim glow of her security lights. Just as they raised the crowbar to pry open the lock, red and blue flashes lit up the night. The sound of sirens echoed through the trees, startling the pair. They dropped their tools and scrambled back toward their car, but it was too late. Police cruisers blocked their escape. Sarah exhaled deeply, her legs trembling as adrenaline coursed through her veins. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, justice would prevail. But as she stood there, staring out her window at the unfolding scene, she couldn't help but wonder, how far was the HOA willing to go? The officers arrived swiftly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they approached the intruders. Sarah watched from her bedroom window, her heart pounding in her chest. She recognized the 2 individuals instantly. Their faces were unmistakable. They weren't random vandals or opportunistic thieves. They were members of the HOA board. Richard Langley, the president himself, stood awkwardly beside his accomplice, a vice chairman named Linda Harper. Both looked guilty, their expressions shifting between fear and defiance as the officers questioned them. "What exactly are you doing here?" one of the officers asked, his voice firm but controlled. Richard stammered, clearly caught off guard. We were just testing the gate's durability," he finally blurted out, as though the excuse would somehow justify their actions. "Testing its durability?" the officer repeated, raising an eyebrow. "At midnight with bolt cutters and a crowbar?" Linda chimed in, her tone defensive. "It's for the community's benefit. We need access to the lake for emergencies." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner before responding. "Breaking into someone's property isn't the way to handle this. You're lucky Ms. Thompson called us instead of confronting you herself." Sarah winced at the thought. If she had confronted them alone, who knows what might have happened? She shuddered, grateful for the presence of law enforcement. The officers took statements, photographed the scene, and confiscated the tools left behind. Before leaving, they issued stern warnings to Richard and Linda, instructing them not to return to Sarah's property without explicit permission. As the intruders slunk away, heads hung low, Sarah felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that the immediate threat had been neutralized, but anger that her peaceful life had been disrupted so thoroughly. The next morning, news of the incident spread like wildfire. Word traveled fast in small communities, and soon, everyone knew about the HOA's late-night escapade. Some residents were shocked, others amused, and a few even applauded Sarah for standing her ground. But the majority remained silent, unsure of which side to support. For Sarah, the confrontation marked a turning point. No longer could she ignore the reality of the situation. The HOA wasn't just being unreasonable, they were dangerous. Their willingness to break the law to get what they wanted proved that they wouldn't stop until she either relented or fought back harder. Determined to hold them accountable, Sarah hired a lawyer specializing in property rights cases. Together, they filed a formal complaint against the HOA, citing trespassing, harassment, and attempted vandalism. The legal process would be long and grueling, but Sarah was ready. She refused to let fear dictate her decisions any longer. Meanwhile, cracks began forming within the HOA itself. Embarrassed by the publicity surrounding the incident, several board members distanced themselves from Richard and Linda. Others voiced concerns about the organization's increasingly authoritarian tactics. Behind closed doors, heated debates erupted over whether pursuing Sarah further was worth the risk. Despite the growing tension, Sarah remained vigilant. She reinforced her gate with stronger locks and upgraded her security system. Visitors noticed signs warning of surveillance cameras and strict penalties for trespassing. Her message was clear. This was her home, and she would defend it at all costs. Though the battle was far from over, Sarah found solace in knowing she wasn't fighting alone. Slowly but surely, other residents began reaching out, expressing gratitude for her courage. Some admitted they'd been too afraid to speak up against the HOA until now. Others offered emotional support, reminding Sarah that she wasn't the enemy. The real problem lay with those abusing their power. As autumn leaves began to fall, painting the ground in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah sat on her porch, sipping tea and reflecting on everything that had transpired. The road ahead promised challenges, but she faced them with newfound resolve. Little did she know, the fight was about to escalate in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The lawsuit filed by Sarah against the HOA sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. It was no longer just a private dispute. It had become public, with local newspapers picking up the story and turning it into a topic of heated discussion. Headlines like HOA caught red-handed, trespassing and vandalism allegations rock quiet community, dominated coffee shop conversations and social media feeds. For some residents, the scandal was entertainment. For others, it was a wake-up call about the unchecked power wielded by their own homeowners association. Sarah's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, no relation, was a seasoned attorney known for his sharp mind and unrelenting dedication to justice. He wasted no time gathering evidence to build a strong case. Security footage from the night of the attempted break-in became Exhibit A, showing Richard and Linda in clear violation of Sarah's property rights. But Mr. Thompson didn't stop there. He dug deeper, requesting internal documents from the HOA, including meeting minutes, emails, and financial records. What he uncovered was astonishing and damning. Hidden within those files were emails revealing a coordinated effort to intimidate Sarah. In one exchange, Richard instructed board members to spread rumors about her being difficult and unneighborly. Another email outlined plans to file frivolous complaints against her in hopes of forcing her compliance. Even more alarming were forged documents claiming that Sarah had verbally agreed to share her gate during a non-existent meeting months earlier. These fabrications painted a picture of an organization willing to bend or outright break the rules to get its way. Meanwhile, the HOA doubled down on its stance, filing a countersuit against Sarah. They argued that her refusal to grant access to the gate posed a risk to emergency services, despite zero incidents ever occurring to justify such claims. Their lawyers portrayed Sarah as selfish and unreasonable, insisting that her actions disrupted community harmony. The courtroom drama unfolded like something out of a legal thriller, with both sides presenting arguments designed to sway public opinion as much as the judge's decision. As the trial progressed, tensions in the neighborhood reached a boiling point. Some residents rallied behind Sarah, organizing petitions and fundraisers to support her legal fees. Others clung to loyalty toward the HOA, convinced that Sarah's defiance threatened the community's stability. Arguments erupted at school pickup lines and grocery store aisles, dividing friends and families. The once idyllic lakeside community now felt like a battleground, its tranquility shattered by bitter infighting. But Sarah refused to let the chaos consume her. She leaned on her growing network of supporters, finding strength in their encouragement. One neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, brought over homemade casseroles every week, saying, "You're doing this for all of us, dear." Another offered free childcare so Sarah could attend court hearings without worrying about her young son. These small acts of kindness reminded her that she wasn't alone, and gave her the courage to keep fighting. The turning point came when Mr. Thompson presented recordings of HOA meetings obtained through a subpoena. In one particularly incriminating clip, Richard could be heard boasting about how they'd wear Sarah down eventually, and warning board members not to back off, even if things got ugly. The room fell silent as the audio played in court, leaving no doubt about the HOA's malicious intent. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the tide had shifted decisively in Sarah's favor. The judge listened intently as Mr. Thompson summarized the case, emphasizing the HOA's pattern of harassment, deceit, and abuse of power. When the verdict was finally announced, it was everything Sarah had hoped for, and more. The HOA's lawsuit was dismissed entirely, and they were ordered to pay Sarah's legal expenses, which amounted to tens of thousands of dollars. For many residents, the ruling felt like vindication. It proved that standing up to bullying, even when it came from those in positions of authority, wasn't just possible, but necessary. As news of the outcome spread, cheers erupted from Sarah's supporters, while the HOA's remaining loyalists retreated into embarrassed silence. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. The aftermath of the court decision sent ripples far beyond Sarah's immediate circle. State authorities, alerted by the judge's findings, launched an investigation into the HOA's practices. Investigators combed through years' worth of records, uncovering a slew of unethical behaviors, mismanagement of funds, discriminatory enforcement of rules, and even instances of retaliation against outspoken residents. Each revelation further tarnished the HOA's reputation, leading to resignations en masse among board members. Richard Langley, once the face of authority in the neighborhood, found himself at the center of the storm. His name appeared repeatedly in investigative reports, linking him directly to the most egregious offenses. Humiliated and facing potential criminal charges, he quietly disappeared from the community, selling his home and moving out of state. Linda Harper followed suit, issuing a brief apology before vanishing from public view altogether. Without their leadership, the HOA crumbled into disarray. In their place, a new board emerged, one committed to transparency, fairness, and genuine collaboration with residents. Elections were held openly, and candidates campaigned on platforms of reform rather than control. Among those elected was none other than Mrs. Peterson, who credited Sarah for inspiring her to step forward. "If it weren't for her bravery," she said during her acceptance speech, "we might still be living under the shadow of fear." For Sarah, life began to return to normal, but with a renewed sense of purpose. She replaced her old gate with a sturdier model, complete with advanced security features. Cameras remained installed, serving as both protection and a reminder of what she'd endured. Yet despite the upgrades, she also made subtle changes to signal a fresh start. Bright flowers adorned her front yard, and strings of fairy lights twinkled along her porch railing, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere. Though wary of future conflicts, Sarah couldn't deny the sense of accomplishment she felt. She had stood firm against injustice, refusing to sacrifice her principles for the sake of appeasement. Her victory wasn't just personal, it was collective. Other residents, emboldened by her example, started speaking up about issues they'd long ignored. Complaints about unfair fines and arbitrary rule changes finally saw resolution, thanks to the new board's willingness to listen. One evening, as Sarah sat by the lake watching the sunset, she reflected on how much had changed. The water shimmered, in hues of orange and pink, mirroring the colors of resilience and hope. Children laughed nearby, tossing pebbles into the lake, while couples strolled hand in hand along the shore. The scene was peaceful, almost idyllic, a stark contrast to the turmoil of recent months. Yet Sarah knew better than to take this peace for granted. She understood that vigilance was key to maintaining it. Every breeze carried whispers of the past, reminding her of the battles fought and lessons learned. Still, she allowed herself a moment of gratitude for her supporters, for her courage, and for the quiet triumph of justice served. As darkness descended and stars began to twinkle above, Sarah smiled softly. Her fight had been hard won, but it had also been worth it. And though challenges might arise again, she faced them with confidence, knowing she'd already proven stronger than any storm.